You are what you eat, both physically and spiritually. In the coming episodes, this dynamic podcast will focus on what we as people take into our physical body, as well as our spiritual body. Scripture says that mankind shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Matthew 4:4. Each episode is designed to wake up the called and shake up the dry bones scattered around the world, for the purpose of opening the eye of what is taken into the physical and spiritual body. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thy eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thy eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? Matthew 6:22 and 23.
Shalom, family. I want to welcome you again to another episode of Iron Sharpens Iron. And I pray that Yah is really blessing you with shalom. This episode is going to touch on a documentary that I saw recently. I made it to the 2021 Tribeca Film Festival. The documentary is called They're Trying to Kill Us. It was executively produced by NBA All-Star Chris Paul and 7-time Grammy Award winner Billie Eilish. It was also co-directed by John Lewis. He's going to be the narrator. And just to give you a quick synopsis, says audiences journey with co-director John Lewis as he crosses the country seeking answers to why Americans of color suffer from disproportionately higher rates of chronic disease than their European American counterparts, while examining the intersections of food, disease, race, poverty, institutional racism, and government corruption. So this documentary called They're Trying to Kill Us is about an hour and 45 minutes. I'm just hoping to do it some justice by promoting the documentary, so I shortened it down to about 15 minutes, and I took certain segments that I wanted to highlight because I couldn't help but realize how much the Bible plays into this documentary, how it parallels what we as Yah people, the Hebrews, are going through right now through this looking at this documentary. I hope you can see this documentary how I seen it, and I wanted to just promote it and highlight certain parts of the documentary. So stay tuned. I hope you enjoy.
The powers that be that are making that money at the top, they trying to kill us. Popeyes, one of the world's largest fast food chicken chains, found predominantly in black communities. They uses almost exclusively black people in their marketing, with black spokesperson Annie is white founded, white owned, and historically white managed. Church's Chicken, a popular fast food chain in black neighborhoods, is also white owned and run. KFC, owned by Yum Brand, is again predominantly white owned and operated. The stereotype of black people loving fried chicken seems to be of white making. And while these companies' products aren't exclusively killing black folks, it's clear to see that they have targeted the black and brown community.
So that part of the segment I wanted to highlight because it took me back to where Marquise and I did an episode last year called Chemical Warfare, Cardiac Combat Zones. And what that highlighted, our episode highlighted, was what you just saw right there, where a lot of these fast food chains play off the stereotype and make millions off the stereotype that black folks love fried chicken. And just like the music industry, this so-called stereotype is not black owned. There's a hidden agenda behind it, where just like the music industry, everything is white or eat 'em own. So I just wanted to highlight that part. Take a look at this one.
Communities of color not only have toxic food dumped in them, but also literal toxins. Hazardous waste sites like landfills, incinerators, and industrial factories are disproportionately located in communities of color, making African Americans 3 times more likely to die from pollution. In fact, Americans of color experience 63% more pollution than they even create themselves. A prime example of this is factory farms. Factory farms, where most animals are raised, produce an obscene amount of pollution in the form of animal waste. Factory farm animals in the U.S. produce 44 times more waste than humans, and virtually none of it is treated. North Carolina's pigs alone produce the waste equivalent of 60 million people, enough feces and urine to fill 15,000 Olympic swimming pools every year. In factory hog farms, pigs are raised in giant warehouses. The waste they produce runs out into massive open-air cesspools. The liquid feces and urine is then sprayed untreated onto fields, polluting the air, water, and surrounding community. And to no surprise, these operations are disproportionately located in communities of color.
When they started spraying animal waste right here, it came over here just like it was raining. Who blows animal waste on another person? You get a headache, you start gagging, you feel like you want to throw up, and the ammonia is attacking your eyes. And the more you breathe it in, the more it takes away your breath. And if you go inside, it's not as bad, but you can still smell it inside. There's no way you can keep the odor out.
Some folks from Johns Hopkins University came down and they did static. They took these Q-tip swabs and they went inside people's homes. They swabbed the walls, they swabbed refrigerator tops, microwave tops, tabletop, couches, children's toys, coffee tables. Everywhere they swabbed, they found animal waste. And it was pig waste. We have almost 10 million pigs in the state. We have more pigs than people.
Okay, that part that I highlighted, if you notice, the scripture that I highlighted was from the Apocrypha, the hidden books of the Bible, 1 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 46 and 47. So if you remember in the Maccabees, it parallels the rise and fall of Alexander the Great, the ancient Greek warrior Alexander the Great, who conquered Persia to amass this large landmass. And one of the places he conquered was Jerusalem. And after Alexander the Great died, his kingdom was divided into, I believe it was about 4. He gave his kingdom to about 4 generals. And the general I wanted to highlight was the one that went inside the temple of Yah during the time of Judas Maccabee and his family and desecrated the temple with pig's blood. And I thought that was so interesting because some of the interviewers were saying how the pig's blood was all over their environment, outside their home and inside their home. And I just felt like that was paralleling Maccabees right there. Take a look at this one. This is in regards to lactose intolerance. You know, I was just real quick, I thought lactose intolerance was a disease, but in actuality, it wasn't. It was a sign showing us that we don't belong here, and what we're putting into our body is not for us. So this clip was interesting.
Europeans not only inflicted new diseases on indigenous people, but they also forced a European diet and foods on colonized populations, perhaps the most egregious being dairy.
Historically, we know the Europeans brought over the cows, the chickens, the wheat, all things not native to the land. and imposed this way of cooking, right? You go to any chef school, it's always French-based, which is dairy.
The single most problematic food that I see in practice is the consumption of dairy products.
Cow's milk, which is what most of us are talking about when we're having dairy, is made for a baby cow. And if you aren't a baby cow, then it is not a perfectly designed food for you.
It never made sense for me, like, why we would drink a cow's milk and not a human. I just don't logically understand it.
Dairy products are a collection of compounds that people can ingest, but they are no more of a food group for humans than tobacco. You can choose to ingest tobacco, but you don't need it, and it's not good for you. And the same is true of dairy foods.
In fact, dairy is linked to quite a few health harms, including heart disease, stroke, a variety of cancers, and it's linked to autoimmune disease, as well as a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms, like gas or bloating for people who are what we used to call lactose intolerant.
Prior to the mid-1960s, people thought lactose intolerance was a disease. And in 1966, researchers went to the Maryland House of Correction, and they tested white prisoners and black prisoners. And what they found is in the whites, lactose intolerance, very rare, in the African Americans, very common. And it wasn't just African Americans, it was Asian Americans, Native Americans, everybody other than Caucasians had a very high rate of lactose intolerance.
It's actually the normal state of things for most of the world to actually not be able to process lactose.
And yet we're still pushing it and we're still talking about it as though it's a small problem. If you are eating something that you are not able to digest, that's a problem. That's not going to be good for you. We shouldn't be saying you need milk at every meal if you can't digest milk.
There's something really insidious about the way that government agencies are promoting and pushing dairy in particular.
Wait a second. What about the majority of communities of color that can't even digest it?
African Americans being 75 to 80% lactose intolerant. East Asians, somewhere around 90%. Indigenous Americans, even higher, up to 95%.
I think we're so used to the disruption that dairy causes in us that people just kind of like, well, you know, I get a little bubbly in the stomach or have gas for 5 hours. I'm like, that's a problem. You shouldn't be doing that. So
dairy is the worst. Dairy's almost worse than meat. It's so awful. It's one of the cruelest industries on the planet. Your dairy is factory farmed. It is mass produced.
Without question, it's our most important food, containing phosphorus and calcium that build healthy bones and teeth. And thanks to modern dairy science, these elements are made more valuable by the addition of vitamin D.
Dairy foods have never been shown to improve bone health. In fact, in the Harvard Nurses Health Study, the women who consume the most dairy products had the highest risk for hip fracture.
We know that dairy is a high risk factor in prostate cancer, for instance. It's also the #1 source of saturated fat in the American diet, which is, of course, a strong risk factor for heart disease.
When we eat animal foods, there's a lot of hormones there.
Dairy foods are very high in estrogens.
Estrogen that your body doesn't make, we call that exogenous estrogen. It attaches to hormone receptors in the body. So which tissues have hormone receptors? Breast, prostate, ovary, uterus. Those hormones attach to those tissues and it makes things grow.
The proteins in milk are often associated with aggravating many of the inflammatory conditions and allergic conditions. High blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, ankylosing spondylitis, asthma, eczema, psoriasis, as well as some forms of cancer, including lymphoma.
We have seen how the government makes a lot of money off of partnering with, remember the whole Got Milk campaign? We all know that drinking a cow's milk is not good for you, right? And that you can get calcium from other sources. It doesn't have to be from cow's milk, and I don't even know what that is. It's disgusting.
Now, they tell you that the government's out there to protect you, and they have strict rules that say that, milk products can't have no more than 750,000 pus cells per cc. I guess if there was more than that, it'd be like pure pus. I think that drinking milk essentially is...
Do y'all see that? I just wanted to highlight that real quick. The doctor said that the FDA has guidelines that say that milk should have no more than 750 cc's of pus. So if you see what this farmer is doing, he's actually squeezing out pus, and we're thinking it's milk.
like finding a festering wound on a cow and sticking a straw in it and sucking.
Makes you just want to like puke thinking about it.
So the single biggest advice I give to patients, number one on the list, is stop the use of dairy products.
It's important for people to recognize that not only do we not need to drink milk, but we can actually get all of the nutrients that we might find from milk from healthier sources, namely plant foods.
The schools, the school districts, everybody has an economic incentive to force kids to take and drink dairy-based milk.
A kid who might be lactose intolerant, and he says, I can't drink milk. Could I get an alternative to milk? The answer is nope, you take the cow's milk. That's it. Federal law says he is not allowed to have an alternative, and they are not allowed to offer him an alternative unless he brings a note from a parent or a physician saying he's got a medical condition. It's totally normal to be lactose intolerant, and those kids should be able to drink something that won't make them sick all afternoon.
That's just a classic of kind of institutional racism within the, nutritional world.
There's no other word to describe what is happening when a government agency knows that something is harmful for a group of people, pushes that product on them anyway. That is injustice. That is racism, plain and simple.
This is 2 times more likely to.
So I hope that close the door for you cow milk drinkers out there. I praise y'all for my wife, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have switched to almond milk. So take a look at this one. This reminded me of the curses of Deuteronomy that my people are going through.
End up blind or visually impaired due to diabetes, 2.3 times more likely to lose a lower limb, and 3.5 times more likely to end up on dialysis than whites because of diabetes complications.
Obviously, once you end up with a leg amputation or kidney failure or heart disease from your diabetes, you're going to lose an average of 17 years of life.
When I learned that I was diabetic, type 2 diabetic, was losing my vision in my left eye, I had permanent nerve damage in my hands and feet, my right thigh had serious nerve damage, I had an ulcer, cholesterol was through the roof, high blood pressure, the black package. We know the song.
Yeah. So the complications of diabetes are really awful, any one of which would be awful. But getting your blood sugar down with diet and lifestyle, you can prevent all of those horrible complications.
Your diabetes is not caused by a metformin deficiency. It's caused by food. And we've got to tackle the food part of this.
Eating just 1 serving of processed meat a day increases your risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 51%. No other food comes even close to that. Dr. Neil Barnard and colleagues conducted multiple peer-reviewed replicated studies showing that when people suffering from type 2 diabetes removed animal products from their diet and replaced them with whole fruits and vegetables, they were able to reverse the disease.
When you go on a whole foods plant-based diet, your body becomes more insulin sensitive. You can reverse type 2 diabetes. You need less and less insulin or other drugs like that. And under your doctor's supervision, most people can reduce and oftentimes get off of insulin altogether.
About 80% of our type 2 diabetics will be able to achieve normal blood sugar levels without the use of medication. They can re-establish health and maintain health.
3 weeks, my vision's totally cleared up. In 3 months, the ulcer went away, my nerve damage went away, my cholesterol went from a 217 to a 57, my A1C went from a 17 down to a 5.7, a pre-diabetic level. No medicine, all food, healthy food, good food, and it was the realization, it was an aha moment that it was not my DNA, it was my dinner.
Untreated diabetes also causes heart disease. Cardiovascular disease is still the #1 killer, despite all of the research, despite all the procedures, and all the information that's been out about cardiovascular disease.
So cardiovascular disease, combination heart attacks and strokes caused by stiffening of the arteries, atherosclerosis, which is caused by the standard American diet and lifestyle.
In heart disease, there are atherosclerotic plaques in the arteries.
Plaque refers to the buildup of cholesterol particles and other inflammatory particles inside of our blood vessels. So not only is the blood flow blocked as that plaque grows inside the blood vessel, but the plaque itself can rupture.
One of the bumps breaks open, that triggers a blood clot. That's all it takes. Just stop the blood flow through that artery. And everything downstream gets no blood flow, no oxygen, the heart muscle there dies. If this happens in your brain, the part of the brain dies.
That's still the #1 killer and what we should be really concentrating on, because for some reason we're not doing better with that. And it's probably one of the easier diseases to treat. All these diseases are symptoms. When your blood pressure goes up high, it's not, okay, the disease is high blood pressure. It's a symptom. Your body is trying to tell you, there's something that's not right here.
High blood pressure, as we've talked about, is one of the leading contributing causes of death and disability. It's so ubiquitous that the majority of people, by the time they reach 65, have high blood pressure, and it's a preventable and treatable illness.
So wait a second, if most of us over age 60 have high blood pressure, maybe it's not a disease, more just a natural inevitable consequence of aging. But no, we've known for nearly a century now. 2 years at this Royal Kenyan Hospital, 1,800 patients were admitted in one study. How many cases of high blood pressure did they find? 0. Wow, they must have low rates of heart disease. No, they had no rates of heart disease. Not a single case of arteriosclerosis was found. So we've known that there is not epidemic heart disease among people that are centering their diets around plants, but you don't know its cause and effect until you put it to the test. When researchers took people with heart disease, put them on the kind of plant-based diet followed by populations that did not get epidemic heart disease, their hope was, say, maybe we could slow the disease down a little bit, maybe even stop it. But instead, something miraculous happened. As soon as people stopped eating artery clogging diets, their bodies are able to start dissolving some of that plaque away, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery. Look, if that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the #1 killer of men and women, shouldn't that be the default diet to proven otherwise? And the fact it can amount to be so effective in preventing, arresting, or reversing other leading killers like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming.
Doctors and the pharmaceutical.
So it's interesting. One of the doctors said, I don't know if you caught it, that heart disease comes from the American diet, the great American diet. It's interesting how it's been proven that some of these fast food restaurants like McDonald's messes with human endocrine system. Start messing with hormones, for instance, in teenagers. They develop quicker. They have pituitary issues, overactive pituitary glands. I digress. Take a look at this one, the Confederacy. This one was mind-boggling.
The industry are all profiting billions of dollars off of our people getting sick, while the junk and fast food industries are making billions making us sick. It seems like they're all working together. In fact, they are. Jeff Kendler, the former CEO of Pfizer, the largest pharmaceutical company in the world, was also the executive vice president of McDonald's. 3 McDonald's active board members have direct ties to pharma. Miles White, executive chairman of the pharmaceutical company Abbott Laboratories. Lloyd Dean, the board of pharmaceutical brand Upjohn Company. Robert Eckert, director of biomedical company Amgen. Coca-Cola's vice president of strategic securities, Kelly Johnstone, comes from the FDA. PepsiCo board member Daniel Bisaya is chairman of pharma company Novartis. Cargill, one of the world's largest meat companies board members, include Bernard Passat, former president of the pharma company Wyeth Laboratories. Richard Anderson of Medtronic, the world's largest medical device company that generates most of its profits from the U.S. healthcare system. Stephen Hamsley, former CEO of United Health Group, a health insurance provider and the 5th largest corporation in the USA. And this is just the beginning. Companies providing life and health insurance as of 2010 own $1.9 billion worth of stock in the fast food industry, investing in the very food making people sick, and then charging higher premiums to customers who end up with diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease from these very same foods. This isn't just greedy corporations, though. The former head of the U.S. government's Department of Health and Human Services, responsible for setting federal dietary guidelines for all Americans, was Alex Azar, who was the senior executive for pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly. If this isn't a conspiracy to keep people sick, why on earth would fast food junk meat companies want pharmaceutical board members when these industries have apparently nothing in common? They want to keep us sick. It's like they're trying to kill us.
It's like they're trying to kill us. If this is not a clear example of conflict of interest, I don't know what is. One hand is definitely washing the other. And we're the pawns on this chessboard. So this section is the final section I wanted to show you, because I don't just like to bring forth problems, but I love to highlight solutions. And I found it interesting how they were just walking through a typical grocery store and debunking the myth that eating healthy is 10 times more expensive than not eating healthy. So take a look at this.
Being healthy and plant-based had to be expensive.
Like a gallon of low fat is $3.99, and a gallon over here is $2.99. So you're saving money, right? I wanted to point out some of the savings that you can grab with frozen fruit. Frozen fruit, you're saving money and you're not compromising on freshness because they're frozen at the peak of freshness. This is easy to throw in a smoothie. You can defrost these. These are a snack. Huge money saving tip for fruits and for veggies. That's $2.19. Yeah. This serves 2, and how many does this serve?
About 50 servings.
About 50 servings. And you just throw in some beans. Like, don't tell me this is expensive. When you're eating plant-based, it's a savings in itself because you just are passing all of this. And the bulk of your spending is normally on animal products for the most part. Like a lot of people always say that, you know, plant-based meat is more expensive, but here you go, $4.99, $7.99, right?
So I just wanted to highlight the wonderful work Chris Paul, Billy Ellish, and John Lewis were doing to the community and to our people. I hope I promoted it well. The website was on the video that I chopped up. Please take time, look at it. It will edify you. And Yah is waking his people up. What was done in the dark is coming forth into the light for edification. So once again, this is Samson with another iron sharpening iron moment. Shalom, family. Shalom.